Hello and welcome to tonight's Storyworks Roundtable. We are going to talk about the soggy middle problem. It's something every writer dreads when things just get kind of slow and mushy in the middle. So let's define the problem before we start talking about solutions. Robert or Kathryn, start us off.
Well, you got this rip-roaring idea for a book, and you just got this amazing hook and brilliant rapid pace start, and the characters are off, and you know exactly how it's going to end because there's this incredible twist of a climax where suddenly out of nowhere the protagonist pulls everything out of nowhere and she conquers the universe. Mm-hmm. But somewhere in between that bit and where you started, there's got to be some interest for the reader to keep them going. And I think what happens is that your kind of creative mind just splurges everything out, and you realize, hang on a minute, I'm 40,000 in, I've got maybe another 40,000 to go, but I need something a bit more interesting before I get to the end. And that's the classic sort of, okay, what's supposed to happen now? So I think it's a problem of lack of structure perhaps, but you know, that you define it as you get lost in the middle of the story. You know where you start, you know where you end, but you get lost in the middle.
Right. Lack of structure is definitely part of it. Kathryn, do you want to add anything to the definition?
Nope, I think that's pretty much it. Losing the trail of your upward momentum, you sort of kind of plateau in the middle there and can't keep that conflict rising or the tension rising fast enough to keep the interest going.
Right. The plateau is a really great image for that too, because we like to think of our ramp or pyramid going from the introduction to the climax. And if you hit the middle and all of a sudden, if you're putting your stakes and tension on a scale, it's like 4, 4, 4, 5, 4, 4, you know, oops, you're in trouble. You've just hit the dread soggy middle. And it can definitely be a lack of structure, but I think that writers who outline or storyboard can have this issue as well. So I think the problem is actually more nuanced than structure. When you are thinking so much about your main plot line and the protagonist and the antagonist climbing up that ramp to the climax, you get this middle chunk in Act 2 where certain things must happen logically in order to advance the action to the climax. You know, and it's like the middle chunk of a trilogy where everyone is traveling. I call them traveling chapters, even when nobody's changing location, because you just need to do legwork. You know, it's like we're marching across the desert to get to the mountain or whatever it is. Yeah. Okay, well, that march across the desert is going to be really dull unless you can make stuff happen.
Yes. I think you're absolutely right about the pantsing plotting thing as well. I was actually having this discussion with my daughter the other day because she's a pantser. She can't stand outlining. She's tried it. She's read my books that I give to her for outlining. She's 14, right? So she loves writing, and she just keeps starting all these things, and she has grand ideas and really good fantasy premises, fantastic stuff. Won't let anybody read anything because she thinks it's terrible. But that's okay. She's practicing. I keep telling her she's practicing. It's fine. One day she needs to learn to finish something.
Right.
We were talking about The Doom Spell by Cliff McNeish. I don't know if you've ever read that. It's a kid's. It's probably lower end of young adult, I would think. And the reason we were talking about it is because in Australia we have some pretty big spiders, and just recently we've had one in our walk-in wardrobe, and then two in Isabel's room.
Oh goodness!
And when I say big, I mean the handspan size. So. They're not particularly fat bodies, but they've got really long legs, and they won't hurt you, but they will jump.
Oh God!
So when you try, try and catch them by putting a plastic lunchbox on them really quickly, and then they run. So you run after it, and then it jumps.
So you're like knocking the plaster off the walls every time you like try to, catch it under the bucket.
Yeah, exactly. And then you finally get it, and you slide some cardboard over the top, and then you free the spider outside, because spiders are good, surprisingly. Anyway, so for some reason, this triggered a thought. We were talking about writing at the same time as having just caught this spider, to say, oh, what was that book? Where there's a really wicked witch in there, and she's got several rows of teeth, and they're all maintained by little spiders. They're in there, and she can release these spiders as well, and they have kind of magic properties. Isabel's racking her brain. Oh, hang on a minute. And she rushes out, goes to her bedroom, comes back with the book. She's got fantastic memory. The Doom Spell, Cliff McNeish. So I bet he is a pantser, because there's one of the things I loved about the book, and this is, I think, where pantsers do have maybe an advantage over outliners, is that somehow those sudden lateral things can just appear out of nowhere, and you think, oh my god, where did that come from? And maybe it came from free writing. So maybe the soggy middle could be just as much of a problem for an outliner, because it's mechanical. You know that you're going from A to B, or so let's say A to Z or Z, and somewhere in the middle you've got to hit that KLM. So okay, well, I've got that. It's where the character's got to become proactive, so write the scene, proactive, but it's not necessarily surprising.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, the soggy middle isn't just about surprising elements, like the spiders cleaning the witch's teeth is great, but he could be a total outliner, but he did a lot of generative writing, like we were talking about in the writing prompt episodes. He did that exploratory free writing or journaling, and just came up with these really great ideas, and then found where to put those into the story. So the issue I find working with clients is that when they have a soggy middle, it's because they aren't making use of their supporting characters and developing their subplots. So when everything is about that one through line of the main plot, and you hit this area that is traveling or technical or logical, where you just need the reader to understand X, Y, and Z before you can get through. Wait, the climax is Z, but you need to establish certain things on the way. You need to bring in those supporting characters and the subplots to enrich the story and to create complications in the protagonist's life and tension in the storyline for the reader that isn't going to exist just in the main plot.
Right.
I
like how you said lateral moves, Robert, where it's like,
yes,
it's not it's not in that line of, oh, here comes the climax, that you're in that direction. So when the protagonist gets jarred off course, or they have to deal with this subplot from the supporting character, or something else is happening that isn't in that direct line, that's where that middle can get really exciting, because there's more tension, because they're not on that direct line. You can't see how they're going to get to Z from A, even though you as an author know it, because they've got that little bump off course that then increases the tension, and how is this going to happen, and now this can't happen because this didn't happen, and things like that. That's the fun part of the middle, that sometimes as authors, like, we don't think that way. We're just like, what's the most logical thing for our character to do to get from here to here, and that's where we kind of have to let our rational, like, problem solving brain like switch off and be like, well, what would I, irrationally, let's come up with about 7 to 8 different options, or this character over here who's, I haven't really explored their motivation, like, what are they doing in the meantime? Like, all of those things can form really interesting things that we miss sometimes in the middle, because we're so focused on that protagonist and their main conflict.
I love that. I wait to give it texture. So that, because I think one of my failures, definitely a weak point, is that I focus very strongly on a protagonist and his or her journey through I'm definitely a hero's journey type writer. I think that's my favorite type of story, whether it's either redemption or world saving or whatever. I identify with it, and you can definitely get lost with not adding enough richness around it. And one way to not have a soggy middle is to have plenty of rich texture going on throughout the whole story, not just the middle. And I like what you said there, you brainstorm 7 or 8 things that could be just completely lateral. I was listening to a podcast just this week where one of the hosts was suggesting to the other that they should write themselves completely into a hole with no idea how on earth they're going to get out of it. And that could be a good thing as one of those 7 or 8 things to do for you. If you think your middle is a bit soggy, you go, okay, well, let's bang myself into a hole and then brainstorm ways to get out of it, because that's going to totally surprise the reader. So that's good, Kathryn. I'm going to use that. It's a good tip.
So I love the idea of lateral moves coming out of what you two were both just talking about. And I do want to emphasize the importance of the supporting characters again and the subplots, because if we've all 3 of us have said now that when you focus on the main plot or just the protagonist, you sort of lose sight of these lateral moves that we're talking about now. But when you're only focused on the protagonist and his problems and his, drive to get to that climax, or your drive to get him to that climax, that's, I think, when the creativity kind of like the blinders come on, but if you step back from the protagonist and his problems and say, oh, Joe, we haven't seen Joe for 5 pages. Joe's really, depressed and needs the protagonist to step away from the main plot line to come save Joe from his depression or something. So then you've got a personal source of conflict to do with the personal relationship, a supporting character and a subplot that complicates the protagonist's drive to the main plot.
Yes. Creating
that lateral move. So like Kathryn, you mentioned other characters, and that's exactly it. Like, start looking at everyone else populating your story and going, oh, how can this person come on the page, and what can he or she do to basically mess with the protagonist's journey, make it harder.
Yeah, I meant to add in when you I know we sort of riffed completely off your supporting characters, but that was in my head. That was kind of one of the things about the things about the whole 7 or 8 things is that you might come up with something that is completely in the domain of a supporting character. And the wonderful thing about that is that we're probably right now talking about either first drafts or outlines, or maybe a revision fix, first revision fix perhaps.
Right.
But then you can go back, and then it gives you reason to redevelop that character, that supporting character, right from the start, and add that richness. And then when the middle moment comes up, and it's the catalyst has been a supporting character, it's totally believable and really fun to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying that, I was thinking back to your spiders taking care of the witch's teeth, and like, what would happen if the spiders went on strike, and they all left the witch's mouth. That's the kind of lateral thinking that creates surprise, and that would complicate this character's life through the relationship.
Have you, I just happened to be looking somewhere else. Have you ever read the James Scott Bell's, what's it called? Write Your Novel from the Middle?
Oh, no, I haven't. I have his plot book, but I haven't read that one.
So for anybody who's regularly experiencing issues with soggy middles, and I don't particularly, but I can feel the sort of pressure of maintaining the pace of a story because I'd like to write fast-paced. And so, as we talked about with trouble, for example, if you peak too early, then you've got no more trouble left in your pockets to last. And or if your ending climax is so massive, that how do I get to that from what was a minor inciting incident? I like the way I don't necessarily adopt this particular technique, but I like the idea that it gives you creatively of looking at the middle as, okay, that's the thing I must define first in my story, is what is that mirror moment where everything changes in a different way. So, okay, there's a hook, there's an inciting incident where we know that life is not going to be the same again, and then we know at some point they're taken on a journey where they just can't go back. But is that middle part of the book where all of a sudden there's got to be some kind of big change? I was trying to find the note. There's a director who says if your movie does not have a middle dramatic scene that's going to wipe the floor with your audience, don't make it. And it's interesting they focus more on that than on the resolution and the climax. So I think maybe part of the reason why some people have problems with soggy middle is because they don't treat it as important, say, as the inciting incident or the final, climax.
Right. That's a really interesting observation to think that, writers are not giving it enough weight. Like, we know that the climax has to be big, and we know that the first scene has to hook a reader and make them want to enter the story world, and we know all of that stuff. But of course, the middle has to be just as engaging, because if your reader is willing to put down your book and go to bed instead of going, just one more chapter, I can stay up for one more chapter, then you're losing your readers in the middle. And so to me, I never even conceived of that, because of course I want every chapter to do its work. I think of it as, like a roller coaster, and you've got the cars, like train cars, hooked up in the middle. So those hooks at each chapter break, they connect the cars. And you don't have like a car that'll seat 4 people and a car that'll seat 1 person and a car that'll seat 3 people. They're all the same size. They're all the same value. They're all giving the reader or the writer an equally good ride up the hill to the climax. So, to think that, anyway, I'm just riffing on that observation that people might not conceive of the middle as being as important as the beginning and the end of the book.
I like that too. It's a neat option to kind of see that turning point in the middle and give yourself some nice meat to work with in the middle, and then to work back. It gives another way of thinking about your story. And a lot of times, especially when I'm outlining, I will do that, where I have that awesome beginning and that awesome end, and like in the middle I get kind of like, okay, I need to have so many, and if I had started with, okay, here's my middle, and I'm even just retooling things, I already know what my beginning and end is, but like, let's start by putting the card in the middle and saying, here's my middle, and then working my way on either side is kind of an interesting idea. It'd be kind of interesting to see what would happen with my brain and my process to do it like that, because that is interesting. And I do agree. I think that not as many writers really consider the middle to be quite as important. Like, it's just, you want those impactful moments, and you don't think so much about that journey through the middle to be that impact. So and
even the idea that we can have that we can have a soggy middle, that there's somehow, I've got to pad out the middle. I think that's insulting to the reader. I'm with you, Alida. I like to, I do structure overall to a 3 or a 5 act arc, so I like to have that as my way of thinking about the story. But when I'm getting down to writing it, I want to write with I want to know what happens next. For every moment, I want to know what happens next. Every scene should be I want to know what happens next. And if you can do that, there is no soggy middle, because they can't go to bed until
right.
But then to what Kathryn was saying about you can get stuck in that 3 or 5 act structure of thinking, okay, so I need to have, and as soon as a writer, I think you're thinking I need to have something in a spot, then there's the creativity gone right there. It should be more of a, oh wow, I've got this ginormous idea for a scene, and oh, that's perfect for the middle of the book, or something like that. So I think I do like to brainstorm genre conventions, the whole obligatory scenes, because I'm writing space opera and they tend to be enjoyed in there, and so I will think about something. Well, that'd be great for an inciting incident, but it's not really a big moment for the middle. And so I will think about a scene. Okay, what's going to be the middle? That's where the reader gets to a point in a book, and I aim to do this. I'm not saying I'm very good at it yet, but I'm aiming to do that. Where they get to the middle of the book and they go, "Holy moly, this book was, this is really good, but now I can't wait to find out how it all happens." That to me should be the middle. Whether it's a thriller or whether it's a literary masterpiece, I think they should be so engaged by the middle, that the rest of it is. They've already eaten the cake.
They're racing to the finish.
It's all icing
yes,
from here.
Definitely. And when people get to the middle of their story and they just aren't sure, like what, they're like, okay, well, this scene is kind of dull, comparatively, but it needs to be here. What am I going to do to make this chapter great? So you've got to look at your structure of your chapter has to mirror the structure of the book. So if you have that like traveling scene that's just giving the reader information and getting the character from A to B, make it the opening scene of the chapter with some setup, and then get some new action in there, Bring in a supporting character, introduce a new conflict, make something exciting happen so that you can have both your bran and your sugar, to keep things moving forward.
We could reverse it out, say, what makes a soggy middle? We're going to need a montage.
Yeah.
Montage. I know. Let's have several chapters of training.
Right. Well, that's okay. You said montage, and we're already at 20 minutes, so I kind of want to wrap it up. But I think people sometimes feel there's a tolerance for soggy middles because you look at the trilogies, especially in film, where people say, "Oh, the second one really just connected 1 and 3." So, people will tolerate that because it's you're getting through to number 3. And also it takes so many words and so much ink to describe, to really depict properly a scene on the page that covers a great amount of time and a lot of effort. But in film, they shoot a bunch of stuff and then they chop it all together. So you've got like a minute that shows the different outfits and the different settings and the sweat and the blood and the whatever, and it's like, boom, okay, we're done. But in literature, you can't do that because you just really need to spell out each word.
That's right. So, you can't say cab, airport, flight, arrive.
Right.
I mean, done in a movie, but in a book, wow.
Yeah, and we're lucky we have, lines of white space for scene breaks. But when it's something important like the hero's journey going from apprentice to master, that takes effort. You want to show the journey.
Yes.
So yes.
That's definitely another show.
It is. It's another show. So coming soon.
I think what you said there was really important, that people think they have to tolerate soggy middles, and the point is you don't have to tolerate that. Like, that shouldn't be expected. You shouldn't expect your reader to slog through to the middle to get to the end. Like, it should be just as exciting as the beginning, and just as exciting as the end.
Completely ripped abs, six-pack middles. That's what we're after.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, we're gonna shake our fingers at all you writers out there. No soggy middles. Do not tolerate them.
Exactly.
We'll be accused of middle shaming now.
Ooh, I like it. Middle shaming. That's right. All right. Well, on that note, with a healthy dose of middle shaming, we are going to wrap up this week's Storyworks Roundtable. You can find all of our episodes at wordessential.com/Storyworks Roundtable. And don't forget to join us on Facebook at the Storyworks Writers Group. Let us know what you think about soggy middles.